think about horror films or serial killers or villains. In real life, the only news stories we ever see about psychopaths are when they are being jailed for something. But how accurate is our stereotype? Does it prevent us understanding the fascinating neurological phenomenon that does affect 1% of the population, most of whom may never break a single law? Defined as an antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy is characterized by an inability to feel empathy or emotion. You've got no emotion, no empathy. It can make psychopaths appear callous, cold, and manipulative. How challenging is it to fit into a society where your brain works so differently from that of other people? Can you live a normal life and successfully build relationships with others, maybe by watching the way they react and copying it? Well, one woman who is very keen to dispel myths and raise awareness of the condition is the diagnosed psychopath Athena Walker. She joins us on the line from the United States. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jeremy. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. I know it's morning where you are. Define, if you can, Athena, the term psychopath, just so we're clear.
So psychopath it's actually not a diagnosis in and of itself. You get diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. But what psychopathy is a collection of traits, and it seems to be related to the way a brain is structured when a person is born. And basically the traits that sort of sum up psychopathy would be ruthlessness, fearlessness, impulsivity, self-confidence. We have focus. We're very cool under pressure. We are very mentally resilient. We tend to be very charming. We have some charisma. And we have low empathy, and we tend to not feel regretful of our actions.
Right. So would you ever get depressed, for example?
No, we don't actually. We don't have the ability to seem to get depressed. We don't get anxiety. We don't have depression. We don't get sad. We don't really have self-doubt, low self-esteem, any of those things. We do have emotions, however. We have most of the more positive emotions, but they're turned down. They're on a, maybe if most people feel emotions at like a 7 or 8, psychopaths tend to feel them between 0 and 3. So it's very low. So we still have them, but we don't experience them to the degree that most would.
What was your behavior like as a child, Athena?
Oh, it was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. I was very independent, but I was also into everything I could possibly get into. I didn't understand. We don't have fears, so I didn't really understand that things were dangerous, and I would engage in things that my parents just absolutely could not comprehend, and punishment does not work with psychopaths. You have to distract us with something that's more interesting at that time. So you could tell us no, and that's just a challenge, or you can distract us with something else, and it takes time for a parent to figure that out.
Were you very manipulative?
Oh, yes. Oh, very much so.
So is that a mark of a psychopath?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, it's a very useful tool, if you think about it. It's a very useful means to an end, where most people would get things through various normal social conversation or normal social interaction, like emotional. We don't have that. So we tend to figure out that the way to interact with people is through these certain cues, and it tends to be quite manipulative. We will tell you what you need to hear to give us what we want.
And when did you begin to realize, Athena, that your behavior might be the result of something neurological, something actually structural in your brain?
Oh, I didn't realize that until just a few years ago. I knew that there was this diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, but I didn't do any research into it. The person who diagnosed me did give me some information, but for the most part, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to it. He summed it up for me, and I took the information. And I thought, all right, well, that's quite interesting, and I went on with my day. However, a couple of years ago, I started really digging into it and seeing where these structural differences in the brain were based on the research, and it started to make a lot of sense to me on some of the things that are just missing for me. So, for instance, I just recently came across the fact that trust, the feeling of trust, is actually based in oxytocin, and we don't process that normally. So that made that was an aha moment, if you will.
Because you don't trust anybody.
Well, I can trust people based on their actions, but it takes a very long time.
Would you fall in love in the way that most people would understand it?
No, we don't have the chemical experience of love. That's also oxytocin-based, actually, and also bonding is as well. So we don't have the love, the bonding, and the trust naturally, but we can love in different ways. We can love through action, through investment, through our intentional application of behavior to a certain person to denote their importance in our life.
But does that not mean then that if a relationship ends, that you would close off so fast and leave that the other person wouldn't even, they'd get very confused that you seem to have no feelings?
It can be quite confusing. It can be very shocking, I think, in the ability for us to walk away after a relationship ends. Sure. Yeah, that can be it's a very stark contrast between our experience and somebody we would call neurotypical. So yeah, we would definitely have that very much, that cutoff.
Can I, if I describe you as being in control of your faculties, rather cold, calculating, highly manipulative, would you say yes, that's probably me?
I suppose I can be very highly manipulative, yes. I don't know if I'm cold. I suppose you could consider it cold because I don't have the emotional investment, but I do make an intentional effort not to come across in that manner. But that's part of the mask.
Well, that's the really interesting thing, Athena, because I know you write about this online, and I've read a lot of your writing about, and in a way you, correct me if I'm wrong here, from what I've read of what you've written, you do have to construct a mask to, the conversation I'm having now could be a conversation with any, what you call neurotypical person. So I would not leave this conversation and think I was talking to somebody unusual there. And I'm guessing that part of it is that mask that you describe.
Oh, absolutely. We have to construct a mask of social behaviors that most people can relate to. Without the mask, we tend to be rather flat with emotional output. So neurotypicals tend to have a lot more emotional cues that they rely on in the background that they don't even realize are there. It's very common for them to have this sort of emotional exchange. However, when that's missing, when the mask is missing for us, there's this sort of flat line. I sort of describe it like if you're in a room with a fan that's been on for hours and you don't really even notice it, but somebody switches it off and all of a sudden that moment of clarity, oh, the fan has been on and now it's completely silent. That's sort of how I describe mask off. It's just sort of flat.
If somebody if somebody fell over in the street in front of you, would you feel anything for them?
I wouldn't feel anything for them, but I would act because that's part of the social requirement. So, I wouldn't have the emotional response of, oh, that's quite terrible. I would still do something to assist them up and ask if they were okay. That's just the social contract. Yeah,
but what about then if you're watching a movie? Would you ever cry?
No, I'd never cry when I watch movies. I do enjoy them, but I don't cry. I don't get emotionally invested in characters.
So you don't. I understand you don't have children, but I'm not sure. If you were to have children, or if a psychopath were to have children, would they suddenly break into emotional territory and feel something completely new?
It doesn't appear that for us with the oxytocin, which is part of the emotional bonding with children, it doesn't seem to apply to us. So no, we wouldn't. We can still raise children in a healthy manner. In fact, one of your own professors over there at Oxford, his father was psychopathic and raised an excellent son, and he has nothing but great memories of him. However, that doesn't mean that there's the emotional investment. There's intentional investment.
What about anger? If you're in a road rage incident, can you completely lose control, or is it the other way around?
I've never lost control, but we can have very strong flashes of anger. It's sort of like alcohol hitting a hot pan. But it's just as quick as it hits, it's gone. For me. That's been my experience. I do understand that males tend to be a little bit more aggressive, however.
Because, yes, most psychopaths are male, aren't they, I think?
Yeah, it's actually about, the estimates are between 10 to 1 to 20 to 1, male to female. It's quite significant.
You have done, I think, a test to determine the level of your psychopathy. Can you tell us about that test?
Oh, there was many tests, actually. I mean, getting diagnosed with psychopathy or actually antisocial personality disorder is very involved. It takes quite a long time. So there was neuropsych testing. There was a lot of personality testing. At the end of it, they don't really tell you, oh, you're a level 17 psychopath. It's not really how it goes. They just tell you that, that you have antisocial personality disorder, and they sort of describe to you what that means. And I'm definitely not what would be described as an above the snow line psychopath, the ones that are imprisoned, that are highly antisocial. I'm more of a pro-social, I suppose you could call me, psychopath. But I have all of the traits of psychopathy, but none of them are manifesting in me in a negative way.
All right, you probably will object to this next question, but if your life could be improved by you committing a murder and you could get away with it, would you do it?
No, I wouldn't.
Because it is impractical,
It's impractical. There's other ways you can improve your life. It's much easier and more legal, and killing's just not something that's even remotely interesting to me. If my life were in danger, that's a different story. I certainly, if I needed to protect myself, of course I would do what I needed to do, and I wouldn't feel badly about it. But I'm not going to go out and kill someone for gain. It seems like a wasted effort.
I know that you did see I think it was a medical professional, quite a high-ranking psychologist, and she said, "Look, let's talk to you as you are, Athena. So let's have the mask off and really understand each other." And then she was rather put out by what followed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true, yes. She really thought that she would be able to handle me mask off, and so we had several conversations on that, and she found that was not the case. And she found that she was much more in tune with the more neurotypical emotional feedback loop that she really thought she wasn't. So it tends to be a very stark difference, and people tend to have a very sort of gut feeling that they just aren't comfortable. They don't get... They a lot of times, for instance, people who are close to me feel very much like they are not wanted or not desired to be in the same room with me, because I don't give them the idea, the feedback that they are. So I have to construct a mask for basically everyone I deal with. It doesn't matter how close they are to me. It doesn't matter if they know that I'm psychopathic. It still requires them to have certain levels of considerations to be taken.
Understood. I'm loving talking to you. I'm feeling like, can I play a bit of music now and we keep you on the line, and maybe if a listener has a question, they can ask you a question. Is that okay?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we're with Athena Walker. She's a psychopath who writes online about her life and experiences. She's in the USA. Maybe from her description, you suddenly think, yes, there's one in my life. Do call